笑，滔滔灭共潮。沧海一声笑，滔滔灭共潮。四海英雄聚今朝，苍天笑，花间战红腰，浪沙淘尽怒白霄。整整70年，咱们中华人民主义，还让这片土地变得满目疮痍。全世界投毒制造各种生化武器，我去，他答应了人类命运共同体。3代爆料，携手占有新天道，振兴我中华同胞，兴起了灭共浪潮。壮志冲云霄，看那国旗飘飘，别鸟协领恶党，神州阳光普照。江山笑，夜雨遥，谁负谁生出一份笑。风萧萧，神像现如潮，盘古开天风潮。3年多的爆料，就是这压死颗中方实锤，每天都有1点也不嫌多。以美灭共，以共灭共，还得靠我们战友们行动。天佑我中华儿女，共建联邦新中国。黑夜显曙光，照亮东方的天。我们宏伟的火焰，我准备了3世多年，越过了死亡幽谷，踏上了灭共之路。终有太多雄剑，不出啊，只能虚度。听梦想，收归正道。一周踏浪自逍遥，苍生笑，热血万丈高，仰天长啸志英豪。战友们豪气穿云霄，盘古相聚在今朝。我定报 The one to save the world, safety behind the people's side. We are running out of time. Take down, action, action. Take down the CCP. Take down, action, action. Take down the CCP. La 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 la.他们的恐惧是我们的武器，我们的胜利。谢谢了，兄弟姐妹们，你们健身了吗？行动，行动，行动！中共，你完了 ！Take down the CCP。Take down the CCP。
CC. It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over, 'cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共你完了，干灭中国共产党这个 CCP， 才能让我们远离恐惧。Take down CCP。
They try to scare the nation with fabrication, but we see through the lies. We won't fall, we will fight you back. Police corruption with crooked assumption. They ran our lives, but no more. We will win. We will take down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧，
Let the bullets fly a little
为
longer.
奴役的人
Let
们
the bullets fly a little longer.
行动，
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动，
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
，Take down CCP。
Bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down the evil CCP。
Good evening, Fringers. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and welcome to episode 19 of The Fringe. I'm your host, David Vincent Bob. The Fringe is simultaneously broadcast in English and in Chinese on gtv.org. That's where you are now. We are honored to have you with us this evening, and we appreciate your patronage. Please spread the word about our show to all of your friends and family, and subscribe and follow us on gtv.org at MOS Talk. My co-host tonight is our Tuesday night regular, and she is the reason I look forward to Tuesdays. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you the one, the only, the amazing Isla. Welcome to the show, Isla. It's great to have you with me again here tonight. How you doing this evening?
Thank you so much, David. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the show today. So how's everyone doing after the daylight saving time starts? Well, I hope our Fringers stay healthy, stay connected with us every Tuesday and Friday on GTV with our Fringers. While I'm so sure that many of our audience are aware that there is an important meeting between Biden administration officials and the CCP officials on March 18th. It's just this week, later this week. So we will definitely touch upon this topic and have some updates about COVID virus, COVID-19 and the CCP virus later. But first, let's get started with some breaking news, David.
Yeah, that's right, Alex. In 2 days, this big meeting with Blinken and some of the Chinese Communist Party high members, and we will definitely talk about that later in this show. And actually, that's what this show is about: accountability. And it's not just about talking the talk; it's walking the walk. And now for our breaking news. I hate to change gears here. I was starting in an uppity mood because I knew it was going to end up going to this now. I have some very shocking news to report to all of my fringers out there. I can't say I'm surprised by this because we are all talking about the CCP, but America and the rest of the world needs to listen to what Gordon Chang had to say just this past Saturday on the War Room with Steve Bannon. For those of you who don't know who Gordon Chang is, he's a conservative communist, a blogger, television pundit, author, and a lawyer. He's widely known for the book, The Coming Collapse of China. Gordon is a regular and a very well-respected guest on the War Room with Mr. Steve Bannon. Let's please roll that short video, Chris.
Well, we've obviously got to do something. And the reason is this is not the last pathogen that will come from Chinese soil. And Xi Jinping now knows that he can spread a disease virtually without cost. So we've got to establish deterrence. And the reason why deterrence is especially important right now, Steve, is that China's working on pathogens that will leave the Chinese alone. The Chinese will be immune to them, but they will sicken everybody else. So China's working on civilization killers. This could leave China as the only viable society. That's why we need to deter Xi Jinping. And why the media isn't talking about this, I don't know. But this is their greatest failing because this is our greatest challenge.
I need you to take heed, my fellow fringers. I'm not here to scare you. We're just here to bring you the news and bring you the truth. Now that the CCP has gotten away with spreading COVID-19 all over the world with not so much as a slap on the wrist, don't believe for 1 second they're finished with their evil. This is far from over. There has been no accountability. There's that A word that you're going to hear a lot tonight from Isla and myself whatsoever for China and the CCP for the virus that was created by them in that lab in Wuhan, China. And that gives Xi Jinping and his ruling party the upper hand. I feel like the CCP has gained a lot of momentum with this virus, and they will stop at nothing to take the most fatal step, as Gordon Chang said, the creation of a super virus to wipe out the entire planet, except for the Chinese, as I'm sure they will also have a vaccine for the virus or a pill that they could take, etc. I'm of course just speculating here, but what better place to have this event start than the 2022 Olympic Games in Beijing? I'm just saying. Not a conspiracy theorist, but the CCP exposes the virus to each of the countries from all over the world via the Olympic athletes. The athletes bring the virus home to their respective country, and then a nightmare begins. I wouldn't look past the CCP to do this. And that's why we need to boycott this Olympic Games. Talk about a super spreader event. This is the super spreader event. We cannot trust them, Isla. All nations must boycott. I do suppose, though, if the CCP wants to spread this civilization-killing virus, they can do it however they like. I guess the Olympics would be the easiest way. The U.S. and the rest of the entire world need to decouple completely from China immediately. Cut off all trade, all air travel, root out the CCP planet spies in our government and universities, as we've spoken about before, and then send troops over to completely eradicate Xi Jinping and the CCP. Done, right? What do you think, Isla?
Well, I think Gordon Chan was definitely right on the claims about the virus and the upcoming pandemic if we do not take down the CCP. Especially, we've been talking about the relationship of this COVID-19 virus and with like the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is basically, a PLA's biochemical weapon lab that are doing a lot of classified projects, which I'm sure that we will talk about that later on that. And I think David was 100% right. Now the world is still talking about whether people are attending the Beijing 2022 Olympics, and was totally absurd that the world is going through such a crazy pandemic and we were still, not holding the Chinese Communist Party accountable, and that's not enough for us to move on or to ensure anyone else's safety on this planet. So moving on forward, the civilian leader of Myanmar's government in hiding vowed to continue supporting a revolution to oust the military that seized power in last month's coup, as security forces again met protesters with lethal forces, killing at least 7, according to a report from The Independent. Manwin King Tang, pictured here, who was named the acting vice president by Myanmar's ousted lawmakers and is a member of deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi's party, addressed the public on Saturday for the first time since the February 1st military takeover. This is the darkest moment of the nation and the moment that the dawn is close, he said in a video posted on the shadow government's website and social media. In order to form a federal democracy which all ethnic brothers who have been suffering various kinds of oppressions from the dictatorship for decades really desired, this revolution is the chance for us to put our efforts together, he said. And earlier Saturday, security forces opened fire at demonstrators, killing 4 in Mandalay, the second biggest city, and 2 in Paye in south-central Myanmar, and 1 in Twing, a suburb of Yangon, Myanmar's largest city. Details of all 7 deaths were posted on multiple social media accounts, some accompanied by photos of the victim. And the actual death toll is likely to be higher, as police apparently seized some bodies and some of the victims suffered severe gunshot wounds that doctors and nurses working at makeshift clinics will be hard-pressed to treat. And many hospitals are occupied by security forces, and as a result are boycotted by medical personnel and shunned by protesters. The independent UN human rights expert for Myanmar, Tom Andrews, said last week that credible reports indicated at least 70 people had died so far, and cited growing evidence of crimes against humanity by the military. Other unofficial but carefully compiled tallies put the number of deaths since the coup at around 90. And Saturday's killings did not faze demonstrators in Yangon who crowded a downtown commercial area past the official 8 p.m. curfew to hold a mass candlelight vigil and sing about their cause. And mostly young protesters rallied at an intersection where they usually gather for daytime protests. And after dark rallies were also held in Mandalay and elsewhere, reports on social media also said 3 people were shot dead Friday night in Yangon, where residents for the past weeks have been defying the curfew to come out onto the streets. And the nighttime protests may reflect a more aggressive approach to self-defense that has been advocated by some protesters. Police have been aggressively patrolling residential neighborhoods at night, firing into the air and setting off stun grenades as part of intimidation. They have also been carrying out targeted raids, taking people from their homes with minimal resistance. In at least 2 known cases, the detainees died in custody within hours of being held away. Another possible indication of heightened resistance emerged Saturday with photos posted online of a railway bridge said to have been damaged by an explosive charge. The bridge was described as connecting the rail line from Mandalay to the capital of the northern state of Kaiching. And the photo shows damage to part of a concrete support. No one took responsibility for the action, which could be seen as support for the nationwide strike of state railway workers, part of the civil disobedience movement against the coup. At the same time, it could also disrupt military reinforcements in Kaiching, where ethnic guerrillas have been fighting the central government. The prospect of sabotage has been openly discussed by some protesters who warned it could blow up a pipeline supplying natural gas to China, seen as the junta's main supporter. And in Washington on Friday, the Biden administration announced it is offering temporary legal residency to people from Myanmar, citing the coup and deadly force against civilians. Back to you, David.
Yeah, this coup in Myanmar is getting really vicious. We've been talking about it for the past couple weeks now. We did an entire episode either last Friday or the Tuesday before, I can't remember. But we do talk about Myanmar in every episode. And our thoughts and prayers obviously go out to all those people there. Their revolution is kind of the opposite of what we had going on with our elections. They're trying to get a democratic government to take over that country, and they had a democratic president elected, and the coup was by the military, saying that the election was a fraud, which sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it, Isla? Kind of happened here in the U.S., but the opposite way. We are already we have a free government ourselves. We already have one, and we were challenging the results of our election. So that's what happens, though. What we can look at Myanmar and unfortunately and say that we are fortunate that this didn't become what's happening to the U.S. right now. Although, as you and I talked about before the show, Isla, that what's happening in Myanmar and this election fraud could be very similar to what may happen in the U.S. now with the Democrats that are in charge, trying to pass this bill saying we don't. Number one, I think it's the HR 1 bill. We don't have to show any ID when we're voting, and number two, they're going to try to enforce that mail-in balloting is the number one way we vote, and that's absolutely insane. Why do you think, Isla, that they'd want us to have mail-in balloting to be the only form of balloting in the United States?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question, and I really understand that, Myanmar is kind of what the CCP has set an example for the Western countries, that if you are not listening to the Communist Party, that if you want to do something different, and this is what happened, they could take over the government by using military forces or by supporting the military, and they're creating chaos, they're creating such democracy disaster in your country, and all of the election fraud that we've been talking for like the entire for all of the episodes on Fringe, we were saying about the U.S. election and all of the evidence that we see here in this country, by not checking your ID and doing all of the mail-in ballots, and it's a lot easier for the Communist Party to control the election. If they control who's going to be the next president of the United States, then guess what? They have achieved their world expansion. They can brag about like what they can do, what the Chinese Communist Party do in mainland China. They can say, see, look how the CCP is so powerful. They can control the election. They can let people who obey their instructions to be the next president of the United States. And that's what really triggers us to feel that it is so dangerous not to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable in the election and all of the back actions in the COVID-19 virus for the Wuhan Institute of Virology, things in Xinjiang and protest movements in Hong Kong, all of these things, that triggers back to the Chinese Communist Party, David.
Yeah, thanks, Isla. And you better believe if they pass this bill that there's going to be a fight, because there's no way. I can guarantee you half of this country is not going to buy into that. There's no way people are going to be forced to do a mail-in balloting, especially with people not trusting our balloting system. And even as we speak right now, I'm seeing things pop up all the time on Populist Press, on the Federalist, OAN, Newsmax. There's stuff popping up now all the time about opening up ballots in Georgia to show that there was fraud. Why are they waiting till now to do that? That's an open-ended question. You don't have to answer that. But yeah, it's something you can't mess with balloting. That is the if you want communism, that's how you do it right there. You take away people's freedom of speech and you control the way they ballot, and eventually you lose all your rights. Your Second Amendment rights are going to be challenged very soon, the right to bear arms. It's going to get messy. It's going to get bad before it gets good, and I hope that we can pull together as a nation and overcome this and see that the direction we're heading is not one we want to go to, Isla, and that's for sure. Right. Okay, so in a report by Rahi Kassam and Natalie Winters of the National Pulse, a corrupt WHO investigator who just so happens to be on the CCP payroll has recently chastised Miles Guo, Steve Bannon, and the media. He also openly admits he refused to look at some very important data during his Wuhan visit. World Health Organization COVID investigator Peter Daszak, in a stunning revelation during a panel discussion, disseminated wild conspiracy theories in an attempt to blame anyone except his financial benefactors, the Chinese Communist Party, for the continuing virus origin mystery. Daszak bizarrely laid into the War Room pandemic show host Stephen K. Bannon and the Epoch Times newspaper for creating what he called an environment whereby the CCP wouldn't want to be transparent about COVID-19's origins. Both entities have called for fuller investigations into the Wuhan lab, shunning the idea that the virus came from a wet market or a bat. Daszak, however, continues to cover for his paymasters, as they called him, while holding a position at the World Health Organization. He said this during a recent live stream: "I've seen incredible efforts from everything from Falun Gong, which is a religious sect, to the Miles Guo camp, they're calling that the dissident camp, Steve Bannon's group pushing the conspiracy theories around China. It's useful to them," he said. "They're funding it and pushing it, and science has been to some extent caught up in it, to other instances absolutely crushed by it. We've not had access to work in China on the origins for the last 12 months, which is ironic because we would have been on the ground there working with our Chinese colleagues, and by now we would have found some really important answers. The rhetoric has held that up." The remarks follow a National Pulse report highlighting how Daszak collaborated with the Wuhan Institute of Virology for nearly 2 decades. He also speaks at Chinese state-run media conferences and recently received federal funding from China. Daszak even seemed to imply that he was personally responsible for convincing fellow World Health Organization investigators that critical COVID-19 origin data recently erased by the Wuhan Institute of Virology was irrelevant. What? Giving Daszak's past collaborations with the Wuhan-based institute, he felt he basically knew what was in those databases. "We did not ask to see the data. A lot of this work is work that has been conducted with Echo Health Alliance. I'm also part of those data, and we do basically know what's in those databases." So he knew what was in there. So that's why they didn't need to look at it, Isla. That's so ridiculous. "I got to talk with both sides about the work we've done with Wuhan Institute of Virology and explain what's there," he said. The databases in question contain information on at least 16,000 virus samples and were deleted in September 2019, a move Daszak claims was due to the lab's concerns over being hacked. This guy is more crooked than a 90-degree angle. And we are talking about the lives of millions who have been infected or who have died from this disease and this virus. It seems at every corner, no matter where we turn, who we talk to, what measures we take, the CCP is always one step ahead of us. And there's one reason why right there. And it's because of criminals like Daszak corrupted government officials like Eric Swalwell and Joe Biden, as well as money grabbers like our colleges and universities, as well as Hollywood. Just recently, Avatar passed Adventure, just like a little side note here, Avatar passed Avengers Endgame as the highest grossing movie in Hollywood, with China's re-release of that film. And athletes such as LeBron James that keep the CCP well integrated into our society.
Right, David. I think you were completely right, especially about the Peter Daszak. You know, I'm sure that Daszak enjoyed the Chinese wine or Chinese food here in Wuhan, and I won't get surprised that he would say something that sabotage the truth that the whistleblower spoon trying to warn the whole world. Well, moving forward, in the report from OAN this past Saturday, it was revealed that the White House officials dodged questions from the press corps about the recent Microsoft Exchange hack. And before his face-to-face upcoming meeting with Chinese officials, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan faced off with the press corps. Reporters wasted no time Thursday trying to pin down the administration's position on the latest China-linked scandal. And in early March, Microsoft alerted users that their email server Exchange had been compromised, which allowed the hackers to install malware to facilitating long-term access to a number of systems. And in an effort to stop the attacks, the Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center analyzed the group's victimology, tactics, and procedures according to the OAN newsroom. And with a high degree of confidence, Microsoft attributed the attacks to a group they've named Hafnium, a so-called state-sponsored threat actor operating out of China. And however, despite the manufacturer of the very system that was targeted confirming they knew who their attacker was, Sullivan claimed the White House wasn't so sure. I'm not in a position standing here today to provide attribution, but I do pledge to you that we will be in a position to attribute the attack at some point in the near future, Sullivan noted. And we won't hide the ball on that. We will continue forward and say who believe perpetrated the attack. Just days after the initial announcement, Microsoft even reported the attacks were ongoing, and Sullivan misunderstood. It is still ongoing in the sense that we are still gathering information, he claimed. We are still trying to determine the scope and scale. It is significant. Indeed, current estimates show that more than 60,000 organizations were compromised. Additionally, security teams worked in conjunction with Microsoft to reveal that the number of hacking attempts tripled every 2 to 3 hours. A senior administration official told CNN that the window for updating exposed servers was measured in hours, not days. Despite the urgency, Sullivan claimed at the end of the day, it's every server for itself. Ultimately, a lot of this comes down to the private sector taking the steps that they need to take to remediate, Sullivan said. Back to you, David.
You know, what's really, I want to say shocking, but not, is that it's obvious this guy has some kind of connection. He said with a high degree of confidence, Microsoft, the company, attributed the attacks to the group they've named Hafnium. And they're a state-sponsored threat actor from China, out of China. But even despite the company Microsoft, saying that this is where it came from, he was like, oh, well, you know, don't jump so far. I'm not so sure yet. Who are you to say that you're not sure that it's from a company that the company that is the basis of all this happening says that's where it's coming from? Somebody's hiding something here. I just don't get it. How could he possibly even say that he doesn't agree with Microsoft when they're the ones that are at the foundation of all this hacking that's going on? It's absolutely insane, I think.
Right. I think, well, even if you are not so sure, you're not going to give the uncertain answers, during our press groups. And it's definitely something that people usually couldn't tolerate when you're doing Q&As, because he's trying to say that, well, we won't hide anything from you guys, but at the same time, he wasn't giving the answers to the exact questions, and he was trying to, to kind of like go around the questions and to like give other informations, and this is what we see that even online, we have COVID in life, we have like online attacks from communist China. Perhaps most likely behind them is the Chinese Communist Party, and this is what we are facing now. That we are facing all of attacks of different forms from this regime, from this party, to the United States. David.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the second half of the show now. We have a lot to talk about tonight. We may go over, we may not. I'm not sure yet. When we get close to that time, we'll let you know. We have to let our translators know so we don't end up having them stuck here too late with us. But it's looking pretty good right now. I think so. The second half of the show, now our show tonight is called the Accountability Episode. And the reason for that is because if you've watched The Fringe, especially I'd say the last few episodes, this is episode 19 now. I can't believe we're almost at episode 20. It's amazing. We've talked about how all these things are happening and all the fingers are pointing back to the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party in China, yet nothing's being done about it. We had the WHO wait a year to go over to the lab in Wuhan when we had Dr. Yang coming over months before that to say that that's where the virus was created. They sat on it. Nothing was done. We've been talking about the Uyghurs in the Xinjiang region of China and the genocide that's occurring there. Nothing's been done about that. And now we have the Beijing Olympics coming up and nobody's boycotting. Why is that? So we're going to talk about some of that stuff this half of the show. The CCP needs to be held accountable for the atrocities and genocide to not only the Uyghurs in their own country and all over the world with the creation of the COVID-19 virus in the lab in Wuhan, China. The problem is that the United States isn't making much of a case to hold the CCP accountable. In fact, it's quite the opposite. They haven't boycotted the Olympics. They're selling out in Hollywood. They're selling out in sports, and specifically basketball. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. The Biden administration has shown over and over again and continues to show that a large portion of his administration are either socialists or they're supporters of the Chinese Communist Party or have ties, whether past or present, to the CCP. We are a nation full of double standards here in the United States. I'm sorry to say it, but we've seen it and it's true. We have groups of insane liberal leftist psychos in small pockets such as BLM, Antifa, woke movement, and cancel culture saying that Dr. Seuss and Aunt Jemima are racist, yet they get up on stage at the Grammys and act like a bunch of fools, making the entire fiasco a lunatic liberal display of violence against police and anyone that disagrees with them. If you didn't watch the Grammys, I didn't. I only saw what I was seeing on the news that OAN and Newsmax were showing. They had actually a rap star up there rapping about the police, and they were throwing Molotov cocktails at Wendy's, and it was violent. It was all about violence against the man. It was basically black against white. That's what it was. BLM against the police. They're perpetuating it, and Hollywood is no different. They prove daily how they sell their souls to the devil. For instance, Avatar, as I said, just took over the Avengers as a top grossing film of all time because they had a re-release where? Well, where do you think it was? In China. They're completely sold out for a few extra bucks because, again, Hollywood sees nothing but dollar signs and they have absolutely no moral compass when their bottom line is affected. I just watched this commercial, Island. I'm not sure if you saw it. I found it on GTV, where a black man, he was a painter. He had paint all over his face and his shirt. He's wearing a T-shirt, and he was hitting on a Chinese woman in a laundromat. The woman does one of these to entice him over to him. She's at a washing machine, and then when he gets close enough, this is the black man that gets really close to the Chinese woman. She shoves a laundry detergent capsule, looks like a Tide Pod almost, into his mouth and then shoves him into a washing machine. A few moments later, he comes out of the machine as a tall, handsome Chinese man. What I want to know, and this is the elephant in the closet in here, is what black actor would actually agree to take this role? Then I remembered, oh, that's Hollywood. There's the double standard. I don't know where they hired this guy. But they'll cry racism, support BLM, and hate on anyone who opposes them in the United States. But the moment that contract is waved in front of that actor's face, the first words out of his mouth are, "Where do I sign?" Can you imagine the meeting between that black actor and his agent? Hey, we have a commercial for you. It's in China, huge money, and I'm sure it was. I'm sure they threw a lot of money at him for this. It's China, and it's the CCP. The only thing is, you have to sell out your entire race because this is an extremely racist commercial against black people. And he agreed to it. That's the thing that kills me the most, that people probably don't think about, is that actor actually agreed to do that. What takes me back to and this is what takes me back to my original point. It's so difficult to decouple from a country, and I'm talking about China here, of course, when our greediness is so massive that we would rather sell out to a communist nation than stand up for human rights. The only way we take down the CCP is for us to decouple from China. That's it. Cut off the snake and the head will die. But we just can't do it. We care far too much about money, and there are massive amounts being paid out to these sellouts, and it's like a drug to them. The more they give us, the more we want. There is a very important meeting, as Isla talked about, in Anchorage, Alaska, and that's happening in 2 days. It's on Thursday. I had a story about it in last Friday's episode of The Fringe. It's a meeting between Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, and China's top foreign policy officials, and it comes as the two countries navigate intense disagreements over trade and human rights in Tibet, in Hong Kong, in the Western Xinjiang region, as well as the coronavirus pandemic and increasing Chinese assertiveness in the South China Sea. So what's going to happen here, Isla, is they're going to talk about all the stuff that the CCP doesn't want to talk about. China will be represented by Chinese State Councilor Wang Yi and the Foreign Affairs Chief of the Chinese Communist Party, Yang Jieshi. I am very much looking forward, as you know, to this meeting, Isla, and we will definitely be reporting to you, to our fringers out there, on Friday about this meeting. It's happening on Thursday. We're going to talk about it on Friday. This could be a meeting where if the U.S. stands strong and lays down the law and say that enough is enough to China, this could really project us into the next phase of our relationship with them. We already know China's stance, people. We've covered it before. They deny everything. They did nothing wrong, and that's a huge problem too. We have a very big event coming up, Isla. As I said earlier, and as you know, it's the Winter Olympics in Beijing next year. Boycotting the Olympics would be a very good sign and stance that we show our solidarity against the CCP and that we are willing to do whatever it takes to begin to decouple and dismantle the CCP. But we all have to be in this together, from the bottom to the top. A 100% commitment from all of our government to decouple from the CCP.
Right, David. Well, I think you were completely right about the upcoming meeting between the Biden administration officials and Chinese Communist Party's high officials. And I think it's very essential that you mentioned the topics was the pandemic, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, or even South China Sea or Taiwan. And these are the fundamental problems that we are facing now in this country or probably all over the world who has the connection with the Chinese Communist Party or with China. And these are the essential questions that we actually could elaborate more that to encourage the government to decouple from this regime or to hold this regime directly accountable, and this is why we are like doing this program every week. So now I would like to share a video about how Peter Schweizer commented on the Chinese Communist Party, and what is our position now in dealing with this kind of like regime. So Chris, please roll that video.
What do you want to say about this meeting next week that is happening between the Biden administration officials and the Chinese officials in Alaska?
Yeah, look, I think the bottom line is you can talk tough all you want, which is what I think you're getting a little bit out of from the Biden administration. Where the rubber meets the road is on these policies. It's not enough to just say we're concerned about human rights in China, we're concerned about their expansionist policies. This is very similar to where we were with Ronald Reagan during the Cold War. The fundamental problem here is not China, it's the Chinese Communist Party and the nature of that party. That is the fundamental challenge and threat that we face. And so, you can talk tough all you want. What you have to do is engage in policies that ensure that you win this competition.
It sounds like China won the 2020 election, Peter.
I think China's very, very happy, and there have actually been speeches in China. You've reported on some of them, and there have been others out there where the Chinese officials are very ecstatic. They were very troubled by Donald Trump's position and the fact that Trump recognized the problem was not the individual actions of the Chinese regime, it's the nature of the Chinese regime.
Yeah.
President Xi has confirmed what a lot of people have known, that this is a brutal, tough dictatorship, and it's not going to change.
So what Peter Schweizer on Sunday Morning Future said is that it's not enough to say that the United States is concerned about human rights in China or the expansion of the power of the Chinese Communist Party. And what we have facing now is very similar to what we have encountered during the Cold War. The fundamental problem is not China, it's the Chinese Communist Party and the nature of this party. And that is the fundamental challenge and the threat that we face today. And we can talk tough enough, but we want to make sure that, as David said, that we engage in policies ensuring to win in this competition or in taking down the CCP eventually. And in the past, former President Donald Trump recognized the problem was not the individual problem of the Chinese Communist Party, but indeed the evil nature of this regime. And President Xi has confirmed with all its acts that this regime, the Chinese Communist Party, is a brutal dictatorship regime and is not going to change. And I think U.S. and other countries, I think what Peter, Schweizer hasn't said in the Sunday Morning Future is that this regime left the U.S., left all of the other countries no choice but to understand its brutal nature and to take down the CCP. David, do you have any comments, on just like the videos that we showed?
Yeah, I do. And I wanted to talk about something, and I've mentioned this before with my host here, and this is about how we perceive Chinese people. Also, there's been a lot of racism happening recently against Chinese people because of what's happening in China. And Mr. Schweizer says it best. You need to differentiate, and I say this all the time. We need to differentiate between the CCP party and the people that live in China. The Chinese people are the ones that are caught in the middle of all of this, and that's a very important fact that you need to know, my fringers out there. The people don't necessarily represent the party; they just follow the party. They have to. In China, you have no choice. You have no right to vote. You have no right to religion. It's funny. Isla and I were talking about. Well, not really that funny, but we were talking about a friend of hers who asked a question to her, and he said that what if the people are eating food and living comfortably in China? Then what's wrong with the Communist Party? And I said to her, well, what's wrong with the Communist Party is that you have no freedom, and it's not going to get any better. And I'll tell you what else is wrong with the Communist Party. There may be some people in China that are eating and enjoying their lives and going about doing what they want to do, but they also know they have to look over their shoulders every 10 seconds, that they're always being watched by the CCP. If you step out of line or do something wrong, you're going to go to jail. They don't have freedom over there. And not only do they not have freedom, there are certain sects of populations over there that have nothing. We've talked about the Uyghurs every single episode since I started the Fringe. They have genocide occurring against them. They're forced to switch, to forget everything they know and to switch over to the CCP way of thinking against their will. They're forced to forget their religion. They're stripped from their families. There's talk about racism and bigotry, and there's sterilizations and rapes and abortions. All that's going on in China, the same country where you have communism. So you tell me, the guy who's eating food and feeling comfortable over there, what about everybody else? And him too. If he gets too high on his horse, they're going to knock him off of it too. So I think, again, one of the most important things that was Schweizer, right? Yeah, Peter Schweizer says is that, to me, is you need to know fundamentally that the CCP is bad and the people really are stuck in the middle of all this. And that's the hardest part about this for me to even talk about. We have to decouple from the CCP, and basically the people in China, the innocent citizens, are the ones that are going to end up suffering from this. Man, we want to have a great relationship with China, but we just can't because of the party that's ruling that country right now. The CCP must be taken down. Take down the CCP, Mr. Guo. That's for you. Back to you, Isla.
Right, David, I think you were completely right about separating the Chinese people, separating China from the Chinese Communist Party. And I just want to, before we move on to the COVID virus, I just want to, have a quick fact for you guys. When David was talking about you don't have any freedom in China, I want to say that I just want to list out one simple example. When you visit Xinjiang, for people who actually live there, they might be very familiar with what I'm saying. If you go to eat McDonald's in Xinjiang, you will have to go to security check. They will open your bags to see that you are unarmed, that you have no attempts of harming people or doing any protest there, and they will let you to enjoy your food in McDonald's. And that's what happened in Xinjiang every day. And if we are not concerned about the things that happen on Uyghurs or on Hong Kong protesters, the next target is us. And I think many Chinese people, even those living overseas, understand that point very well. So moving on forward, let's take a look at the data of CCP virus now. Worldwide cases now, we have 120 million. And that means one confirmed case among 63 people. And last week, I think it was 117. So almost, it almost feels to me that within 2 weeks, we have 10 more million new cases. This is still spreading now every single time, every single minute. And we have to stop this virus. We have to stop this pandemic. And domestically in the United States, we have almost 30 million cases now. So where does this virus come from, and how do we resolve this pandemic is always the question that we have to ask. And Dr. Li Menyan was the first virologist to define the COVID-19 as an unrestricted biological warfare by the Chinese Communist Party. So here in the Whistleblowers Movement, we also named COVID-19 as CCP virus. Therefore, understanding the evil nature of the Chinese Communist Party is the key that we believe to solve this pandemic. And we are too kind, according to Dr. Yang, people are too kind and too naive in confronting the Chinese Communist Party, because most people believe that COVID-19, even though it came from the lab, it might be a lab accident more than a long-term plan of unrestricted biowarfare. However, CCP took advantage of our kindness, built a huge net of lies, and destroyed our lives now. And on March 12th, Mr. Miles Guo, the founder of our Whistleblowers Movement, has whistleblowed another time in his live stream, saying that the Trump and Biden administrations have not once stopped their secret multi-department work on writing a report called The Coronavirus Truth, the white paper on COVID-19. So a simple reminder here, Dr. Liman Yan will be publishing a new report adding new concepts on the CCP virus as unrestricted biological warfare in response to several scientists who sabotaged Dr. Yan's Wuhan lab origin claims earlier on. So what we see right now is that we have the white paper on COVID-19 upcoming, and we also have a new report by Dr. Yan upcoming. So here are the two things about the CCP virus that I want more fringers. Please spread the word about it. I want more people to know that we are doing these things to reveal the truth of the COVID-19. And for the previous two reports by Dr. Yan, please search Dr. Liman Yan on the Zenodo website or search Dr. Liman Yan on Twitter to have the latest info from our brave scientists. And I understand for new fringers or people who might not be so familiar with what we're doing in the whistleblowers movement, it might take some time to digest the concept of the SARS-CoV-2 actually as an unrestricted biological warfare. And so now let's take a look to see how the state's government's former lead investigator to the virus origin, David Usher's viewpoints on the coronavirus. Chris, let's roll that video, please.
Has really been a 14-month cover-up by the Chinese Communist Party. The State Department's former lead investigator into the virus origin, David Usher, told me he believes the virus could have come from research being done on a bioweapon from the lab in Wuhan.
First, that the Wuhan Institute of Virology is not the National Institute of Health. It was operating a secret or classified program. In my view, and I'm just one person, my view is it was a biological weapons program.
Usher has spent a career leading investigations that uncovered secret nuclear weapons programs in Pakistan and North Korea. Usher and other experts who spoke today at the Hudson Institute say that in 2007, China announced it would begin work on genetic bioweapons, and basically that China has entered a biowarfare era where they take viruses and make them more lethal.
So I want to do a quick summary about the video that we just watched. What David Usher said actually is one, Wuhan Institute of Virology, what we know, the Wuhan Fever Lab, is not a national health or medical research organization. What they do is the secret classified biological weapon program. And investigator Usher also, secondly, his viewpoint, spent his lifetime career leading the investigation on secret programs in the past used to be in North Korea and Pakistan. But now Usher and another expert at the Hudson Institute say that in starting from 2007, China announced that they began work on genetic bioweapons. And basically what Chinese Communist Party has done is that they've entered the biological warfare era where they take the viruses and make them more lethal. So David, I know we've watched Gordon Chan's videos before. It seems to me that David Usher's viewpoints was so similar to what Gordon Chan had said in Steve Bannon's War Room. So what was your thoughts on David Usher's comments on the coronavirus?
Well, yeah, this mirrored almost exactly what Gordon Chang said in the video we just played earlier tonight, in the beginning of this episode. This is stuff that we can't overlook. This is very, very serious. And when you have two completely different people from different walks of life saying the same thing about this thing that's occurring in China that they're creating to basically wipe out mankind, except for the way I see it. When I heard Gordon Chang and I just saw this from David Usher, what I'm picturing is basically Xi Jinping and the CCP basically just want to annihilate the rest of the world and then just have the world be all China, CCP Chinese people or something. I don't get it. Who does that sound like? Who wanted just one race for the entire world? Adolf Hitler. We keep going back to how much Xi Jinping and the CCP is like the Nazi Party. And this couldn't even be more similar than this example right here. Instead of wiping out all the Jews, they're wiping out the rest of the world except for Chinese. And basically, that's what what Hitler did with the Nazi Party. Is it wasn't just going to be Jews after that; it was going to be anyone that wasn't like them. So anybody that's not Chinese, this is them taking it to another level. And this is some scary stuff, Isla. I don't know that we should. Well, I know we should not let this go on any further. And I don't know what action the U.S. is going to take or the rest of the world is going to take. I don't know why people aren't waking up to this. There has to be. Why do we all see what's going on here and they're not doing anything about it? That's, again, going back to the topic of this episode is accountability. And that's what it's all about. And we're going to talk a little bit more about accountability in the end again. But they need to be held accountable for this. These are some very scary times here. And like I said, when you have Gordon Chang and David Asher talking about the same exact biochemical, bioweapon warfare coming from China, eyebrows need to start raising and people need to start asking questions, because the more and more time we spend not doing anything about it gives the Chinese, the CCP, more and more time to perfect this virus that they want to use to eradicate the entire world. And this is, I would never say that I'm a conspiracy theorist, but based in what I see in reality. And if you look at the way things are playing out right now, you can't help but think there's some great substance to what we're talking about here tonight, Isla.
Right, David. I think one point that people have to understand is that this is not, all of a sudden we see like many people like Gordon Chang, David Usher came to stand out to see, to say that the coronavirus is, somehow related to the biological warfare program by the Chinese Communist Party. And this is not the only pandemic. If we do not hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable, this won't be the only pandemic that we will go through. And for people, who have like common sense about the biolab in every country, not only in China, they won't just be researching on creating one virus. For any bioweapon programs, they are developing multiple programs targeting different, having the different targets or so. And what is actually scary about this is the Chinese Communist Party is developing something that targets one race or targets the races that exempt from the Chinese people. And this is why this is so evil, and this is so brutal that the regime has to be taken down, not only for the rest of the world, but also for the Chinese people. This party has done so much, has done so much to destroy our lives, to take away the freedom from all of democracy, freedom-loving people. Look what it done in Xinjiang. Well, look what they done in Hong Kong, and look what it wants to do to Taiwan. These are all of the things, and look how the virus has changed our life for a year and a half almost. And people are still, stuck in buildings. We are banned from long distance traveling. So really, I think what becomes very interesting is that now, at least the mainstream media has become more and more confident to say that the COVID-19 came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And many people realize that the WIV, the Wuhan Institute of Virology, serves as a PLA's biochemical lab, developing classified biological programs by the CCP. And this is why finding out the truth of the origin of the COVID-19 become more and more essential to everyone. If it was a biological weapon program implemented by the CCP, which most whistleblowers movement members truly believe, we ought to know that only taking down this regime would prevent future man-made epidemics from this party. And we may have cures for the COVID-19, but we couldn't stop the Chinese Communist Party from releasing a new virus if we're not holding this regime accountable. So we have a very last, short video to present in today's show. I want everybody to see how Dr. Peter Navarro said about the COVID-19 virus, about the CCP virus, and its relationship with Hong Kong or its future moves to Taiwan. So let's roll the video, please, Chris.
Right now, with Hong Kong, now she's bragging. He's got not one country, two systems. He's got one country, one system. They've rolled up Hong Kong, which is the greatest city in the world, a place I absolutely love. First place I went to as a naval officer with the Pacific Fleet. They fell in love with China and the Chinese people. Now they got their eyes on Taiwan. They say the South China Sea is an internal sea. That's the kinetic war, geopolitical. But they're also still trying to run the tables on finance, on all the unrestricted war for information war, cyber war, economic war. They look at Biden as being compromised. Are we in a situation that's like the 1930s, where you saw Nazis in the West would not stand up to him? Churchill was in the wilderness, kept saying, hey, if we don't stop these guys now, it's going to be a horrific shooting war. We must stop them now. Nobody would listen. Everybody mocked him. Is that the situation we're in right now, where she and this group of gangsters understand the West is on their back foot?
I said day after Biden got elected on TV that the first thing they're going to do is make a move on Taiwan. CCP will make a move on Taiwan.
It's a pretty bold statement. What do you mean by that?
Test Biden. What I mean by that is that they're going to move some ships there. They're going to basically probe to see whether there's going to be resistance from the Navy, the U.S. Navy, and I think they will definitely try to put the move on and take Taiwan in some way. The way the Chinese dealt with Hong Kong, to me, is one of the most important pieces of circumstantial evidence that the CCP virus is a bioweapon. We'll leave the question open as to whether it was deployed intentionally or accidentally. But once that got out of the lab, and we know that it came from a Wuhan lab, what that did is it took all the protesters who were in Hong Kong out on the streets, basically humiliating the CCP, and locked them up in their buildings. And it was that single act, using the virus, that allowed the Chinese Communist Party to take Hong Kong. And to our shame, this country did not stand up for Hong Kong at Hong Kong's time of greatest need. And that's appeasement. That's our Sudetenland. What happened to Hong Kong, that's the Sudetenland, what Chamberlain did with Hitler and opened the door to the blitzkriegs that took France.
Well, we clearly see that in the video. Bannon actually asked, are we in the same situation like Churchill was mocked when he tried to warn the world to stop at the small price? And what Peter Navarro had responded to that was the Communist Party of China would make a move on Taiwan to test the Biden administration, and they will send out the ships close to Taiwan to test if there's the U.S. Navy. And the way the CCP dealt with Hong Kong, according to Dr. Peter Navarro, that the CCP virus is a biological weapon, and the release, whether intentional or accidental, of this virus pulsed the pro-democracy movements in Hong Kong. So see here, Dr. Navarro actually made a link, made a claim to say that the CCP is using this virus to lock the dissidents up at home in the buildings. And a single act of using this virus actually allowed the Chinese Communist Party later on to take over Hong Kong. And to our shame, in this country, the United States, where we live today, did not stand up for Hong Kong, and that's appeasement. And history has told us appeasement never worked for a communism dictatorship regime. David, how do you feel about Dr. Navarro's claim on, everything like the CCP's plan on Taiwan or what they've done in Hong Kong, and how do you view the links between the virus and Hong Kong protest movements?
Yeah, you and I talked about this before the show, and I had a revelation. I was like, wait a second. I remember way back when the people in Hong Kong were protesting in the street, and they had a really strong force out there, and they were showing that they wanted to be free, and they wanted to break free of this communist, the Chinese Communist Party, and they had this contract signed with China that China would not interfere, and they started interfering right there. Excuse me. I'm sorry. And I remember during that time, I was starting to talk to people, and I said, what's kind of weird is that, and COVID came out like soon after that, and I was like,
right.
I was telling people, and I remember this, and I'm not making this up either. I remember telling people that I said, I think that they probably created that virus. And what I said was, I think it's kind of strange how strong those Hong Kong protesters were, and then all of a sudden they're being quarantined because of a virus. I just, for some reason, I don't know why it didn't click. I didn't put two and two together, but I would almost 100% agree, so close to 100%, like 99.999, that they created that virus to keep those Hong Kong protesters in their apartments, in their houses, like you said. And then it just kind of got out of control after that, because that's exactly what happened. I remember the timeline like it was yesterday. I remember saying, all right, Hong Kong, go for it, get your freedom. And then all of a sudden they were gone and this virus hit. And I was like, wait a second, this is weird. Why is this happening? And I kind of forgot about it because we all got so caught up in what was going on with this virus. And that's great that you brought this up tonight, because it really just reignited that thing inside of me that I forgot originally that all really happened. We kind of got away from that with everything else that's happened since then. And something else, Isla, that you talked about was, what Navarro was talking about was, Hong Kong's relation, or China's relation, CCP's relationship to Hong Kong and Taiwan and everything else is something else that's overlooked. Is how they're the CCP is basically a bully to the rest of the world. That's how they are. They just flex their muscles and they, go and flying over Taiwan with their jet fighters, and Taiwan, sending theirs up there to chase them out of their fly zone. Their presence in the South China Sea, trying to challenge our military. Is it to take attention away from the fact that they are working on this biological weapon? Maybe. I mean, that's something I never thought about either. You can't put anything over on the CCP because they do nothing but lie. That is all they do. And I am not and would not be surprised if they are trying to create this weapon to like I said, to like we've seen 3 people talk about it now as a biological. I mean, and there's books written about it too. When are we going to do something about it? That's the thing. So what I wanted to get back to was the fact that they are the bully to everyone. They're trying to deflect attention away from the fact that they are doing this. And one thing to think about, Isla, this kind of came to me as I was talking to you tonight, and I was thinking about this during the show, is that the CCP, to them, this type of warfare is so economical too. They're not losing any money by creating a virus. You know what I mean? They're just they got a bunch of scientists in a lab. Right. They're creating this virus. It doesn't take a lot of money to do it, but you can destroy an entire race of people, or they can destroy the rest of the world if they wanted to, if they created this super virus like they're trying to do, with spending very, very minimal money. They don't have to send out soldiers. They don't need tanks. They don't need ammo. They don't need weapons. The only thing they need is someone to take that virus over to wherever and start spreading it. That's all they have to do. That's the scariest part. And that's what, when you hear things like that, you're like, you know what? This is all starting to come together and make a lot more sense for me, especially with what's going on with the CCP and this virus. Yeah, that's what I had to say about that, Isla.
Well, you have very great points about your understanding of the Chinese Communist Party and the understanding of COVID-19. And I definitely agree with you that, it almost is at no cost for the Chinese Communist Party to design such a program and to release this virus, whether accidental or intentional. But what we see that the connection with this virus and Hong Kong, that the CCP originally planned to use this virus, to stop the Hong Kong pro-democracy movements, because so many students, so many workers try to, spread their voices on the Hong Kong streets, and they try to use this virus to lock them up in the buildings, but eventually, for some reason, they just lost control of it, and it went back to Wuhan. It went back to mainland, and things kind of got lost control, and the virus was eventually, spread all over the world here and caused over 15 million deaths now in the United States. And for people who live in the United States for such a long time, or for people who never know anything about China or the Communist Party, they might find it very difficult or challenging to believe that a regime would kind of like release a virus to its own people. But look at Xinjiang, look at Taiwan, or look at any other human rights violation and incidents in the history of China. And this is exactly what the Chinese Communist Party had done for over 70 years to its own people. And they are doing, the greatest measure that they can do to suppress the Chinese people, to suppress Falun Gong, to suppress Chinese dissidents. And I know that many members of our whistleblowers movement, their families got detained, got threatened in China. So this is kind of like why we're here every Tuesday and Friday to, spread the word about the truth of COVID-19 and trying to help more people, especially in the Western world, to understand the nature of the Communist Party. So here's what we all have today. So thank you for all our Fringers for joining us. And please download the apps of GTV. I know we have just, updated the new version of the app. So make sure that everybody update your app version to the latest ones. And also please browse GNews website. We have amazing news updates on the truth of COVID-19 and latest information about the Chinese Communist Party. And we will be back this Friday, 7 p.m. EST time. Right, David?
Yeah, and I kind of just wanted to close it up with the account really quick here with the accountability angle. Like we talked about earlier in the show, Isla, we have a really, really important, very, very big meeting this Thursday in Anchorage, Alaska, with our Secretary of State Blinken and Sullivan and the two leaders from China. And we got to, we have to be we have to stop. We have to talk rationally with them. Although I know the CCP isn't going to be rational. They've been given their orders. They're going to say what they're going to say, and they're going to get out of there. The next step after this meeting on Thursday is going to be the biggest step. It's not going to be the meeting so much. It's going to be, Isla, what we do after the meeting. Right. And I'm so tired of talking about it. I'm glad the meeting's happening. Blinken seems like he was on the same page as Donald Trump with the CCP. Mm-hmm. We need to start sanctioning them again like we were doing before. I think we still do have some sanctions against them, but the most important thing, though, is, again, one more time, what this episode about is accountability. If you don't hold them accountable, everything that you and I just talked about is going to come to fruition. And we are going to end up seeing death in this world unlike we've never seen before. And that's the raw, honest to God truth. That's what's going to happen. And we certainly hope that this meeting Thursday opens up Americans' eyes to what the CCP is up to and what they're willing to do and say. They're probably going to say a couple things maybe to kind of smooth things over, but they're going to keep on doing what they're going to do. Like I said, Isla, it's all about what are we going to do after the meeting. And I want to thank you again for joining me this evening, Isla. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show every Tuesday. I'm sure we'll see you again soon. And especially, I want to give a special thanks to our Fringers out there who grace us with their presence every single week, 2 times a week. Like Isla said, every Tuesday and Friday, 7 to 8 p.m. right here on gtv.org MOS Talk. I'm going to plug this again. We're blessed to have you, and we cannot do it without your support. We really appreciate it. For all of us here at The Fringe, I am David Vincent Bob. Be safe, be free, and God bless you and your families. We'll see you here Friday at 7. God bless. Thank you. Good night.
Good night, Fringers.
Take down the CCP, take down the CCP, 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 take down the 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 CCP, 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 take down the CCP, take down the CCP, take down the CCP.
Take down the CCP, take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. Let me tell you what I've been through, baby. Lived a life that was hella unfair. Seen things that been driving me crazy. In a country where the leaders don't care. Didn't think we had the courage to change it. Tore it down and they weren't prepared. Everything that they kept us from saying. Now we talking and they better be scared. Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. I said, take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
Communism sucks, hard for me to give a fuck. Try to tell them and they try to keep it on the hush. Middle finger up, turn into a fist. They wanna keep the poor so they never rich. If you wanna see the future, look into the past. Been a century of silence, we gon' take it back. I'm just stating facts, tell you how it is. Ain't no way to change shit if we don't resist.
Take from us. Tell us what and who to love. Swear I finally had enough. It's time to rise above. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take down the CCP. I said take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Communism's dead to me because it killed our families.
这是你我维护正义的必须，这是你我维护正义的必须。
Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Take down the CCP. Follow me and I'ma set us free. Take